it's Naomi Finlay here, your Rapper renovation expert. Now, there are both pros and cons when you're looking at either a private treaty or an auction. And I tell you what, as a buyer, I kind of prefer private treaty just that little bit more. I feel there's a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to a private sale. And that's because I don't need to have everything set in stone on auction day as the buyer. So how do you use that flexibility to your advantage as a buyer? Well, are you aware of all the parts of a contract that you can negotiate to the benefit of your renovation project? But, you know, you're probably going, don't I already have a lawyer, Naomi? Isn't what they're for? Now, I know you most likely have a lawyer, and if you don't have a lawyer, a solicitor, or a conveyancer working with you, then I strongly suggest that you get one. They absolutely need to be part of your consulting team. And yes, your solicitor absolutely is your right-hand man or woman when it comes to all this nitty-gritty legal stuff. And he or she is the expert who will guide you best down this route of negotiating the contract for the purchase of your new project. But it's also good to know what the main points in a contract are, and that way you can see how you can have an impact on creating the best possible deal for you to buy. And it might be simply things like getting early access, extended settlements, which in the end can save you money and increase your profits. So, first things first. Your goal is to get a contract with clauses that benefit you without being unfair to the seller. And your solicitor should always keep this in mind when suggesting different clauses for you to add to your contract. But what is a clause? Well, I'm totally not talking about a big jolly man with a red suit that is pulled around by reindeers. I'm not talking about that. But not to bore you too much with contractual law, but your property contract is made up of a whole bunch of information. And a big chunk of that is aimed at defining your duties and your rights as well as the owners. These are usually come under a heading called general conditions. And they're like the name implies. They're stock standard rules that are in most property contracts. And there's stuff like how long do you have before you can change your mind and you can back out, which is effectively a cooling off period. And how long do you have to get your finances in order? And usually, that's part of a generic clause as well. But what you are more interested in are the clauses that you can add into the contract. So these are additional clauses, for example, and they're the ones that your lawyer will throw into the contract and will benefit you, or that is the aim at least. But just keep in mind that if you have a 10-page list of these extra conditions, the owner might run for the hills in the opposite direction. So it absolutely is a balance. So I mean, if you sat down and you shook hands and you were given an encyclopedia conditions, would you shake hands or run away? Yeah. It doesn't matter how many dollar figures you've laid out on the table. If the length of the depth of the conditions is too intimidating and too overwhelming for the seller, then the chances are you're not going to get the deal over the line. The other thing you might have to keep in mind is your relationship with the agent. Keep your friends close and keep your agents even closer. That might not be a mainstream saying, but it sure applies when you're renovating in the property game. And the last thing you want to do is not scare off the guy who's giving you all the property leads. Having said all of that, adding clauses to a contract is a great idea, as long as they are well thought out and will truly benefit you in your renovation project. Remember, the goal here is to buy a property in the best possible deal, which doesn't always mean the highest sale price. So you need to use your clauses and your conditions to make sure that this deal and this contract is going to give you the best possible profit for your renovation. So what are some of these standard clauses and why do we pop them into our contracts? So there's a lot of mumbo jumbo in contracts. Luckily for you, your legal guru, your conveyancer, your solicitor, they'll be able to work through all of it with you. But there are 4 that can be really beneficial clauses in a contract if you really know how to use them. And the first one is one for a building inspection. So this is one of the best ways that you can make sure that there are very little surprises in your your property. And that is where your offer is conditional on an acceptable report from a building inspector. So when you make a contract subject to an acceptable building report, you're essentially safeguarding your renovation budget and trying to minimise your renovation buffer. So imagine the building report comes back and it turns out that there's substantial pillars underpinning the house that are falling away and that the bathroom floor is rotted and you hadn't seen that before. Absolutely, these are all things that you can manage in a renovation, but only if you were able to foresee them, only if you were able to plan them into your budget. And if you hadn't taken this damage into account, you'll find yourself bursting your budget in no time. So a building inspection clause will give you peace of mind to know that you have minimised as much as possible any hidden surprises that could jump out mid-renovation. Now, pest inspection. This is another type of clause that you can insert. It's usually done together with the building inspection. So this clause works in the same way as the building clause, in the sense that you're having an inspection to check for any vermin, major infestations, or any white ant damage or activity in that property. And again, this is purely safeguarding your renovation budget and your renovation buffer. And what this does, both clause 1 and 2 I've just mentioned, the building and the pest, it allows you the opportunity to renegotiate a price if any scary items pop up. Now, the settlement date. This isn't a clause in itself, but it's certainly a bargaining chip that you can be using. So the date or the length of the settlement that you decide to set up with the seller of the house can really be worked to your advantage. For example, you might want a super quick settlement because you're approaching Christmas and you want to get in and get out so that you can have the property on the market or leased before Christmas. Conversely, you might go, you know what? I'd love an extended settlement. I'd love the owner to be in the property all the way over Christmas, and I'll start the renovation maybe end of January when I finish the other 2 projects that I've got going on. So as a renovator, you can utilise, depending on your workload and your availability, the time of year and the market, you can utilise within reason the settlement duration to your advantage. And the next clause is a finance clause. So unless you have a huge wad of cash laying around in your back pocket, or that you already have completely approved finance from a bank, this is one of the best ways that you can get some breathing room about getting your finance together. This way, you can make an offer on a property without really having to worry about exactly how much funding you have. You can make an offer on a property and then start the ball rolling to get fully approved finance for that specific property. This is one that a lot of sellers do balk at, so only use it when really necessary. So there you have it. You get a lot more say when it comes to a private treaty contract than you probably thought. So use these to your advantage without being unfair to the seller of the property, and you'll be one step closer to renovating for wealth successfully. Thanks for joining me. Did you know I wrote a book all about renovating to create wealth and freedom in your life? I've added the link below in the description for you. Enjoy.